preparation is a thing. Like it or not, it's here to stay. And yes, it's all over TikTok, but is it actually useful? Sure, looks good, but can you get a better extraction out of it? And can it change your grinder from being a cheap entry-level grinder into something more like a commercial grinder just from using a couple of coffee tools to enhance that coffee? Well, I'm Ryan, your Chief Espresso Officer, and here today we're going to run through a couple of different coffee tools to see which one enhances your extraction and makes a better coffee and turns your grinder into something more. Let's check it out. So we see so many videos now of people whisking their coffee or doing OCD distribution, using a coffee funnel, lots of different things on TikTok. It's all over TikTok. People don't know any better, but the extraction is terrible. Which ones, if any, are useful? Is puck preparation really useful? And can we turn this Breville Smart Grinder Pro into something that's more like a commercial grinder, an EK43 level? So this costs $200 Australian and that EK costs 5,000. Can any of these tools help us get a better extraction when we know the grinder is only entry level? Let's check it out. To start with, we're going to do zero puck preparation, and that means we're not going to use any of these tools. We're simply going to use the grind straight out of here and run that extraction like we used to, except not going to tap the sides of the filter because we now know that that's not what we do. In fact, we call it a no-no that we now know. I mean, we don't say that, I just made that up then. That is going to give us our baseline, and then we're going to see if we can improve anything on the extraction side of things using just the same fundamentals, but using a bit of puck preparation in between. So let's have a look at our first extraction. One thing I will point out is obviously we didn't muck around with uneven tamps. I have a very consistent tamp. I know that from doing this for so many years. And if you tamped on an angle, you would definitely see a difference with the extraction happening less at this end and more at the other end. This particular device here is a cradle, so it actually helps you sit perfectly in the basket so you don't end up tamping or over tamping or tamping unevenly, because it does not allow you to do anything else than other than tamp flat. So why would we buy any tool then? Well, the reason is, in an ideal world, and obviously some of these tools are not going to be for any cafe environment, but if you have an entire day to make a coffee for yourself and you want to get that extra little bit of goodness out of your coffee shot, then these tools might be useful, and investing in them might be helpful in just getting that extra 20% out. So essentially what we have to understand about coffee and what we're doing is we're squeezing the oils out of all of those coffee grinds. All of those coffee grinds have really beautiful solubles inside them, and when you add the pressure and the hot water, you're squeezing out oil that comes into the cup, and that's what we're drinking. So if we can extract a little bit more and a little bit more of those tasty, juicy flavors, then why don't we try to? That's why we invest in some of these tools to help us, but we want to make sure that we get the right investments. No point going out buying a $500 tool if it's only going to give you a 1% improvement. And likewise, a $20 tool might give you a 20% improvement, and it might be the perfect tool for your home. So that's why we invest in tools, and that's why we're doing this experiment today. And of course, if this information is useful, please give me a thumbs up, give me a like. It just helps get this video a little bit further along, give somebody else a chance to look at what tools they might be able to find useful for their home setup, and it really helps just make these videos go further. The next tool is the Chisel. So this is by my guys in South Australia, Pullman Group, and they make these precision tampers as well as this thing which is a distribution tool called the Chisel. And the way that this works is you actually put this in after you've ground the coffee, spin it, and it helps distribute the coffee evenly, and we'll show you what that looks like. So the basic function of the Chisel is to sit in, and you can adjust the depth of it. I've got it just going down 5 mil, so it helps just get rid of that cone shape of grinds that allows to distribute the grinds a bit more evenly around the basket. Spin it like that, you can see it's distributed it more evenly, and now we can tamp that and see if we get any improvement in the extraction. All right, so you can see that even with the chisel, the extraction is still uneven. This side is immediately extracting, that side still waiting to come through, very slow. So we're gonna get an uneven extraction, and that's gonna be a little bit more sour, and this other side's gonna be more bitter. I don't think the chisel, I'm sorry Pullman, you make fantastic products and this is beautifully made. I'm not challenging the actual manufacturing, just the idea of what a chisel does, because I think the problem lies in the fact that it only distributes that much of the coffee. So the top 5 millimeters of coffee is evenly distributed, but all of the base of it could still have uneven parts, fines will go to the bottom. So it's not getting deep enough into the grinds to actually help spread them around and mix them around to make that extraction nice and even. So although it's a beautiful product, and there's other ones like the OCD from Honor Coffee and other distribution tools like this, I don't believe they really create an even extraction. So how do we get around that extraction in the base? Well, there's a product called the KRUVE, which actually lets you sieve through all the coffee grinds into their respective microns of size granules. And you can see here, and that might do the trick. So let's give this a try. The KRUVE is a really interesting coffee tool because originally it's designed for filter and it's meant to be for filter. I'm going to use it in this instance for espresso, but it's a big wedge-shaped filter system. Look at all of these different sieves in here, and there's multiple different size screens that you can buy, ranging from 1200 microns right down to 200 microns. You can see here, they're all the different size screen shapes, but we're using 350 micron, which is what our coffee grinder produces. And to catch any of the really small stuff, we've got a 250 micron sieve that sits below it. So all of this is separated out. It's not a huge amount. I would say it's about 10 to 15% of the coffee grinds were fines, what we consider fines, and they're really powdery. It's like flour, the tiniest bit of grit. Whereas when I separate out the 350 microns, we get a lot of grit in there. And it's really consistent. I can feel there's not any fine parts in there at all, so they've all fallen through. Nothing went through the 250, well, very little went through the 250, as you can see here. So we know that the smallest one is larger than 250 microns. All right, and now we're going to test it to see if we can improve the coffee grinds that's come out of the Breville to become a better shot and give you a better extraction and a better coffee at home, and whether the KRUVE is a tool that you can really use. Now this shot is done at 350 microns, so this is coarse. This feels coarse, you can see how much coarser it is than the other coffee, and now when we look at the extraction, we can see how just no puck resistance whatsoever. Water just gushed through before the pressure was even applied. As soon as the pressure started to come in on the machine, it just burnt the coffee. Everything got destroyed. Coffee was spurting everywhere, and we proved the point. You need those fines. And then this particular shot, this is fine. This is the powdery 250 microns. So it's a little bit coarser than 250 microns because nothing went through the 250 micron screen. And this is just flour, very, very fine. And as you can see now in the extraction, there's no water coming through at all. That means the coffee has expanded to create a solid puck, not allowing any of the water to flow through, causing a completely over-extracted. I did a double extraction here just to see if any water would come through on the second time we extracted it. It's not, obviously, this is not what you do to get a good coffee. Still, we got a little bit that looks like some soy sauce. It's just completely oil slick. And here is no sifting at all, just using all the coffee that comes out of the grinder, putting it into the basket and running that through, and look at that extraction. Just delicious. So we can really see how important having both the fines and the coarse grinds together is. So we can see how much of a difference separating those two types of sizes of granules out, how much it affects the coffee. One didn't come through at all, one gushed through, burnt everything, and this last one, which was a combination of both those fines and those coarse grinds, made a perfect extraction. So I don't understand the science, so maybe somebody out there can help me with the science, because I'd love to understand why we need the fines in the espresso, something to do with applying that amount of pressure, creating a base of fines to create that resistance? Or is it because if you take those fines out, you give too much space there for the other granules to expand, and it doesn't expand and fill the gaps to cause any resistance? I'm not sure, but I'd love to know if someone out there is more scientifically involved in coffee than I am. Please let me know. Yeah, I'd love to see. I have concluded the KRUVE is not a useful tool for espresso drinks, and we will now focus on other tools. All right, so what other tools could we use to help distribute the grinds evenly? Well, this is called a coffee tumbler. It's a two-piece tool set. So this sits in the base, you pop your grinds in there, this goes directly into your basket, and then we bring that up, and that evenly distributes, lets all the coffee fall down evenly into place rather than heaping it. Let's give it a try. Now the problem I can see straight away is that you still have some heaping around here, a lot lower there. So it does need me to just evenly spread it out with my fingers anyway. And that's just purely because of the design of the tumbler as well. It just creates a bit of mounding in certain areas. It did a nice extraction. That was a decent evenness, a little bit heavier around the sides, so that probably was from the mounding. But overall, a pretty nice extraction there. So the coffee tumbler worked okay, but they're not cheap. They're about $80 for this. So, and they're a bit of effort. Like you have to do a little bit of work, and it's a bit fussy. I'm not 100% convinced this is a tool that everyone should have at their home, just for the amount of fussing around. Like you've got to grind it into there first, then you've got to put it in your basket and slowly pull it up. Yeah, it worked. It did a better extraction than the other tools. However, I'm not convinced that this is essential. But let's have a look at our last tool, which happens to be the cheapest tool, and let's see how that compares with the other tools. So the final tool that we're going to review is called a coffee whisk. It's a series of acupuncture pins. They've been blunted a bit so you don't accidentally give yourself some Asian therapy. That will sit on a nice little stand here. That's a 3D printed stand. And the idea is that we're going to manually distribute all the coffees around. This is a perfect example of a Whisk distribution technique tool. And we're going to give that a go and see if that declumps, gets rid of all of the coffee inconsistencies and settles the coffee into the basket nicely. See how that extracts. Now, the other thing that is important with this coffee whisk is to use a coffee catcher. So these are magnetic catcher. It just gives you extra rim around the edges so you don't knock all your coffee grinds out. And now I'm going to stick the coffee whisk in and just move it around, whisk that coffee. It is super satisfying to do this because the coffee becomes light and fluffy as you whisk it, because it's breaking up all of those clumps and distributing the coffee grinds evenly. So look how nice and fluffy that looks. We just settle that and now tamp it. Let's have a look at this extraction. Look at that. So it immediately formed in the center, and now it's just extracting very evenly. There's not a lot of variation in the color. That significantly looked better than any of the other shots. We can see that the coffee whisk produced very even extraction, and that was coming out of the Breville grinder, which we know isn't as consistent as our more expensive commercial grinders. It has a lot of clumping issues as well as different sized grinds. However, the cheapest of the entire bunch created the best results, and I have to admit I wasn't a believer of the coffee whisk. I'd been seeing it for a while before we created the one and printed it out, but I was just thinking it didn't look like the effort involved was worth it. However, comparing them side by side with all of the other tools out there, I have to say that the coffee whisk is the one I would recommend if you wanted to start going down into precision coffee. Combined with your cheaper grinder will give you the best results. Obviously, don't forget you need the coffee catcher as well, but those two go together really nicely and don't cost you an arm and a leg. That whole thing there would cost you less than $50 and will significantly improve your coffee extraction. Well, that's it for me. If you want to learn more about coffee and getting the best out of your machine at home and getting the best out of your coffee, jump over to the website coffeebeansdelivered.com.au and check out our online courses, links down below. And otherwise, just leave me a like and subscribe. And thanks for watching this video. I'm Ryan, your Chief Espresso Officer, and as always, enjoy your brew.